You're listening to Interview Time. On January 1st, 2007, Bob Lyren arrived in Manila on what was supposed to be a month-long vacation to visit some friends. He ended up staying in Asia for the next 13 years, living and working for extended periods of time in the Philippines, Thailand, and most recently Japan. In March of 2020, as the COVID-19 pandemic swept across the world, he was forced to return to his hometown in Ohio. But instead of spending the lockdown isolated and indoors, Lyren decided to take an open-ended solo motorcycle trip across the United States, documenting his journey in a motovlog called No Direction Home. In this episode, Lyren and I discuss his adventures traveling and living as an expatriate in Asia, how engaging with and assimilating into foreign cultures has enriched his experiences living abroad, and how going out on the road and into the unknown is helping him find his way back home. Bob Lyren, welcome to Interview Time.
Thanks for having me, man. Congratulations on launching your podcast.
Thank you. You have been producing a vlog.
Correct.
And I think you just told me it's up to 17 episodes. And you're driving across the country on a motorcycle. I think you called it a motovlog.
Correct.
And you've titled it No Direction Home. And I'm just curious why you decided to call it that.
That's a great question to start with because I don't know the answer.
Right.
I'm actually hoping that I'm going to figure that out over the course of this podcast.
Right.
There's the obvious connection to Bob Dylan and Martin Scorsese, the wonderful documentary, which I love both those guys and I love that film. But the words "No Direction Home" have a deeper meaning to me somewhere.
Yeah.
And I'm actually hoping to figure it out today. So that's what we're tasked with today.
I knew you back probably from 2003 to
Correct.
about 2007. We were friends here in Los Angeles.
Right.
And you left the United States in 2007.
I did. I left on New Year's Day, January 1, 2007.
And do you think at the time that you moved away in 2007, were you looking for adventure?
I didn't start by saying I need to go on an adventure, or there wasn't anything wrong with. I didn't feel like there was anything wrong with my life that I needed to do something drastic to try to change. So yeah, I didn't feel like, well, I need to do this. I'm going on an adventure. I kind of just felt like I was doing exactly what I should be doing. Right. I remember back in Los Angeles when I left Los Angeles at the end of 2006. Seems like a lifetime ago, but there was certainly a level of like influx. My life was a little bit in flux, and that I didn't have a lot of the common things that might hold a person down, like a mortgage or a family or a career that I didn't want to leave. So the opportunity to go was certainly apparent to me, but it wasn't like a sense of like, I need to get out, I need to get away. But now looking back on it, I do think that I was seeking out a feeling or an idea from myself that I wanted, but I wasn't aware of it at the time.
What was the plan at the time?
I was on the run from Johnny Law. I'm just kidding. It was not a front-loaded plan. So initially when I left the U.S., I went to the Philippines. I went to Asia. And I went there on invitation from some friends who had started a call center in the Philippines. Right. And they invited me to come hang out. And initially, I was only going to go for a month. And then 1 month turned into 3 months, which turned into 6 months. And then I was like, well, I'll just stay for a year. And then I haven't been back in like 13 years. I mean, I've been back periodically to visit. Sure. But I haven't been back in 13 years. So when I left, it wasn't a plan to stay. Once I got abroad, I stayed.
What do you think kept you over there?
I remember, like I said, it wasn't a front-loaded plan. So it wasn't like, oh, I'm going for a job, or I fell in love and I'm going to stay with a partner. Or there's a lot of reasons that people move to different places. For me, the only thing I remember, or one thing that I remember, is that when I got off the plane in Manila, the Philippines is a beautiful country. The people are wonderful, but it's also a developing country. And so there's a little bit of chaos that comes with that. And you get off the plane in Manila and you're just hit with this wave of heat and noise and urban environment, and I think for a lot of people, when they travel abroad for the first time or when they spend time abroad, it can be a little intimidating, which, we can get into more of that later. But I just remember distinctly that I just felt totally at ease. I felt totally relaxed. There was no learning curve. There was no like adjustment period. Like I got picked up at the airport. We went to dinner and I was just like, oh, okay, yeah, I'm totally cool with this. Like, this is great. And certainly my eyes were like pies. I mean, I was looking around at all the stuff, but I wasn't tense. And so one year when I recognized that, and I thought, as time went on, why would I leave this place that I feel so comfortable and good to be at?
So there was almost a sensation of like, I'm just instantly a sensation, I'm in the right place. I'm where I'm supposed to be.
Exactly. I mean, I hesitate to use that word home.
Right.
But there was certainly, because there is no direction home apparently.
Right.
But there was just a feeling of just like very relaxed, very at ease and happy.
Right.
Almost immediately. I just took to it almost like a fish to water, being an expat living abroad.
What is it about Asia that has captured your imagination or pulled you through it?
Right. That's also a good question. I think that each country has a different element of culture that affects me as an expat and living abroad. So my experiences in China or Hong Kong are going to be different than my experiences in Thailand. But for me, there's a simplicity and a sort of a groundedness in their moral and ethical approach to life. There's also a very relaxed attitude about being in Asia. It's sort of a mix between respectfulness and ease. Each country brings something different to the table, whether it's China or Vietnam or Thailand. I don't know that I could put my finger on exactly why, except to go back to my previous answer, which is that when I was there, I just felt totally at ease. Yeah. Not that I was uncomfortable or antsy or not happy when I was living in America, but there was certainly like a level of excitement that I maintain up until today. Like every day I'm aware, even though I try really hard to assimilate myself into the local culture, I'm aware that I'm a foreigner living here. So there's almost just like a built-in level of excitement of like, I'm not from here. And so I've lived it. And so I think it's that excitement paired with just a feeling of being at ease and happy to be there, which has sort of carried me through 13 years of living abroad.
Is there one place in particular that you would consider to have been particularly formative?
Each place certainly brought its own elements that helped shape me and shape my time in Asia. I think that my last stage, which was in Japan, had a profound impact on me. Living in Japan and being around that culture for 4 or 5 years certainly helped shape who I am. I will say that probably when I was in the Philippines, I remember at my end of the time in the Philippines sort of thinking and figuring out that like I'm much more patient than I used to be. And I think that that's also just a byproduct of being around Asian culture, which is not as extroverted as American culture. And so you have to learn to be a little bit more subdued, a little bit more patient.
So maybe you can kind of walk us through a little bit of what you were up to in the Philippines.
Sure. I was in the Philippines for about 5 or 6 years. And at the time I was pursuing media work, film and media production. I was working as a producer and independently, just kind of creating my own environment. And I got really fortunate in that I got hooked up with a lot of musicians that live in the Philippines. And these are wonderful musicians. Philippines is actually like, I consider the Philippines with the UK and the US to be one of the best places for music.
Right.
Not to dive into a history lesson, but the Philippines and the US have really strong ties because of our military background. And so American culture is very evident in the Philippines. Everyone in the Philippines speaks English. They watch the same TV shows. They listen to the same music, as opposed to other countries in Southeast Asia that have very little American influence on their culture. The Philippines has a big American influence on their culture. And so for me to go there and do that kind of work was very easy. Just because we had like a common language of media and culture and history.
Do you think there was something about being a foreigner that made you kind of like give you a little bit of a leg up or something? Like,
certainly different.
Were you able to convince people to work with you more or different? Or?
Well, I think that, it's exciting for if you're working the arts or you work in media and there's a different point of view available to you, you might want to take advantage of that. Obviously, there are sometimes they didn't want to work with me.
Sure.
I remember that at the time I was working with some really well-known and famous musicians in the Philippines, and they had been doing music and media for so long that they had sort of a global perspective because they traveled and played music all over the world. So for them, the idea of it was exciting for them, I think, to work with someone not from their country,
right,
just to offer a different perspective. Another thing I did was I hosted a radio show on FM radio. And so it was called Lost in Translation. And I had a friend, another American guy that I was doing it with, and we would do a 2-hour radio show every Saturday night. And they gave us complete freedom to play whatever music we wanted. So this would have been right up your alley. My friend and I, we would build these amazing playlists of songs, and we would take movie sound bites from movies and put them in the show. And as long as we didn't use any bad language, we had basically carte blanche to do whatever we wanted. And that was a pretty cool experience to be on the radio. And every Saturday night from 9 to 11, people were tuning in to 97.1 to listen to Lost in Translation. Which is pretty cool.
Did you guys have a little bit of a following with that?
We absolutely did. I mean, at the time we had we had all the necessary social media platform. We had a Facebook page and an Instagram, and we used to.
And this was run out of Manila?
It was run out of Manila FM radio. And we used to we would encourage, this is it seems like so long ago, but we would encourage people to message us live while we were on the radio and chat with people. And we had a segment called Ghost DJ, where we would ask a friend to pick a song, to give us no explanation, just pick any song you want, we'll play that song. And fans would try to guess who was the ghost DJ, who was the based on the song and stuff. Anyway, it was another great experience, and just something that happened. I wasn't pursuing it. I'm not a radio guy,
right?
But I just met these people, and one thing led to another. And then all of a sudden, it was wouldn't it be cool if two foreigners, expats, were doing a radio show in Manila? It was fun.
What took you from the Philippines, I think it was, to Thailand next?
Correct.
How did that sort of chapter end, I guess? And then
sure.
You went into
so a lot of it was opportunities that came up. So when I moved to the Philippines, I was already traveling to Thailand regularly. It's easy to go from the Philippines to Thailand, just flying over there. They're relatively
And this
close.
was on business? Or?
Yeah, I mean, I would go I was traveling to Thailand just for fun, a couple times a year. And then if a business opportunity or an opportunity to travel with someone that was doing work there would come, I would go. But the opportunity to go to Thailand, to go to Bangkok specifically, came from an offer. There was an international school there that was interested in starting a media program for their students. So this was a private international school in Bangkok, and they decided they wanted to start a media program, but they didn't have anybody to do it. And I had a friend that worked there. This guy said, hey, I know this guy in the Philippines that works in media, and he's a producer, and he might be willing to do it. So on my next trip over to Bangkok, I met with the school, and they explained what they wanted to do, and it sounded like a fun challenge and a fun adventure, so I decided to do it. So
and what were they asking you to do specifically?
Set up a multimedia film production type program for the students at this international school. So this would be a private school where expat kids or kids that are maybe have one foreign parent but live in Thailand want to go to school. And so they wanted a media program because their students were now, this was circa 2012.
Right.
So there was a lot of interest from kids that were in high school to start learning about media, and they wanted to start a program.
Yeah, and I think things like social media and everything are going into full swing.
Exactly. They're really starting to jump off.
Yeah.
Everyone's starting to get an iPhone and have a phone and using social media. So they wanted a program where they could kind of channel that. So I actually was totally in charge of developing the curriculum, how the program's going to work, what do we need to buy, what do the kids need to study, how's this going to fit into their social studies or their math, or their English classes, what kind of classes can they attend. So I spent 4 years building that program at the school.
You were ready for the next chapter, I suppose.
I was ready for a new challenge. And the idea of moving to Bangkok, which is a place I had visited many times, I was very excited about it. I do remember that we talked earlier about formative experiences, and I think that the Philippines is a Manila's like a first world city surrounded by a developing country. And I'd spoken earlier about like becoming more patient. And certainly one of the experiences was like when you're living in a place like that, you have to learn to be a little bit more relaxed because things don't work exactly the same way as they do here. And I remember at the end of my time in the Philippines, even though I loved it, I was acutely aware of like, it's difficult to live here as a foreigner. And I did it for 5 years, but I was aware of the difficulties I was having and sometimes the stress of like just trying to manage my life in a place that I'm not from. And so Bangkok was a little bit more foreigner friendly. They had a little bit more experience just because of a longer generation of tourists and foreign influence. So, and I, like I said, visited there many times. So the idea of going there was almost like, oh, it might be a slightly easier for me to live there on a day-to-day basis.
When you were in Thailand and you were in Bangkok and you were setting up this school, who were you hanging around with? I mean, who were your friends?
It's interesting to me because when I was in the Philippines, all of my friends were locals. And I think that's because of the influence of like Western culture on the Philippines. So like when I would meet someone like a musician, for example, that was the same age as me, we might have read the same books growing up and watched the same TV shows. And
so there's that cultural
connection.
You guys have yeah.
And also the language. So like he speaks English very well, like fluently. And so all of my friends when I was in the Philippines were Filipinos. I hung out with very few expats. And then, as I said, when I moved to Bangkok, it was almost like, in terms of infrastructure and quality of life, maybe a step up. But my social circle was almost like a step down because Thailand has a more insulated culture. And ironically, Japan is even more insulated. So,
and I was thinking just now, there's been like, this kind of progression as you've gone farther east.
Exactly.
Like,
as I've gotten more into developed nations, my interaction with people on a personal level has gotten less and less. But in Thailand, Thai culture is very strong. They're very proud. It's a very vibrant and individual culture. And so I didn't have as many Thai friends as I did when I was in the Philippines. However, the trade-off was that I got to be a part of a stronger cultural identity. So it was almost like it was a trade-off. So when I was in Thailand, I actually hung out with more expats. They have way more expats in Thailand. In fact, I think more foreigners live in Bangkok than any other city in Southeast Asia. So there's a large expat presence in Bangkok. So I knew a lot of expats.
And was there kind of a recognition among because you said your friends more so with the expatriates? Did it have its own sense of community, I guess you would say? And what would be the characteristics of that community?
Sure. So like all things, it changes. And it changed a lot while I was there. There was the Asian financial crisis, which I believe was 2008, if I'm not mistaken. After Southeast Asia recovered from that crisis, there was a boom of growth in Asia and also in tourism. And I remember, so the first time I went to Thailand was 2007. And then I moved there in 2012. The experiences that I had in 2007 were completely different than the experiences I had in 2012. Both like on a street level of like buildings are now gone, replaced by new apartment buildings, and not to be a person that's like aches for the old days, but it had just like a lot more. When I was there in 2007, you felt like a foreigner living in a foreign country, whereas now there's so much growth and so much development that it's almost becoming more, with growth and development, things are just becoming more neutral.
And yes, and kind of globalized.
Exactly. I mean, like,
so you have this authentic culture that was there,
mm-hmm.
and then all this foreign money is now
correct.
Probably coming in.
And like on a street level, like, Thailand's famous for its street food. Okay. Mm-hmm. And so when I first used to go to Thailand, like you could go eat dinner for $1, like the most beautiful Thai, pad thais, noodles, whatever, for $1. And it was being prepared on the street by a Thai person with a push cart, and it was delicious, and it was $1. And there were streets of these people. That's how they made their living. Well, they're now gone. because they built an apartment complex. A bunch of foreign investors came in, or the Thai government or Thai businessmen built a luxury condo there, which is great because the city's developing, it's growing, but at what cost? Mm-hmm. And obviously, as a guest there, it's not for me to comment on that. Like it's their country, it's their culture.
Sure.
And if this is the way that it's going to develop, that's fine.
Also, they may think that you're participating.
Exactly. You're part of the problem. And so, but to get back to what you said, Thailand's called the land of smiles, and they're very friendly and very relaxed, but I always respected their culture. I mean, I still do,
Sure.
but so that insulation that we were talking about was never a problem for me. In fact, I think one of the reasons I was able to survive and be happy for so long was that I was very aware of trying to assimilate myself into the culture of where I was. I was not just trying to be a loud, happy, aggressive American guy wherever I was. And to get back to something you said before, one of the differences between when I got there in 2007 or 2012 was that if you wanted to live in the Philippines, or Thailand, you didn't have a choice. You have to assimilate to their culture. Okay. There's no, you don't have a choice. You have to eat Thai food. You have to speak the language. Otherwise, how are you going to get anything done? In the Philippines, even though they had that Western influence on their culture, it's still I have to eat their food. So I need to learn how to order it and learn how to like it. And when I got there, the only expats or the men and women that were around, they didn't have a choice. They had to make that decision. But as things have developed, it's a lot easier to be there now. So you can essentially go there. You've got 4G. You've got a bunch of restaurants. You've got a luxury apartment. I mean, when I first moved there, I was living in Thai neighborhoods. I mean, my neighbors were Thai. It's just Thai people, and to them, it was this novelty that this white guy was living on their street. You know what I mean? They loved it. They thought it was crazy.
Yeah.
Little kids poking their head out of the door and laughing at me and wanting to come up and look at my skin and, my eyes or whatever. And so in order to not just thrive, but just in order to exist, you have to be willing to assimilate yourself into the culture. And I was very aware of that going back to, like I said, the first time I got off the airplane, I was like, okay. And I was very aware of the culture around me, and I identified that as I need to become a part of this if I'm going to stay here. And I think I was successful, which is why I was able to stay for 13 years.
When you went in 2007, you said there were streets full of street food vendors. You could buy noodles off the street. But now when you went back in 2012, that had kind of disappeared.
Slowly. From 2012 to 2020.
And what is that for us? Is that kind of globalized economy? I know what you're talking about. If I were to characterize it, I would call it the Dubai syndrome. It's the world is turning into the duty-free shop at the airport. There's something authentic that's being swept away, and then something kind of globalized and commodified that's coming in. And I'm wondering if you've experienced that feeling. You may not, but it seems like you're talking about that right now.
You said it perfectly. There's a globalization that's happening, and like I said, what do I want? Or do I don't want that? I don't want Thailand to develop and for people to make more money and for their quality of life to improve. Of course I do. I think that it's a byproduct of, you do lose a little bit of your culture when you become bigger and more global, and there's more of an influx of foreign investment or foreign culture that's coming into your country. And it's a challenge for these countries to try to maintain it. And I felt like the only thing I could do was to try to embrace their culture and practice it, so I could just do my little part of helping to maintain what I saw and what I liked about the place, learning to speak a little bit of the language, learning about their local customs, going to the temple on their holidays, things like that, and participating as a way of trying to help preserve it. Because I enjoyed it so much. This is why I was there, because I loved the culture. There was a moment, there was a thing that I saw happening, and it was tied directly to the generation behind us, you and I, and the advancement of social media. And we call them digital nomads in Asia. And what these are people that, this is all pre-COVID, of course.
Sure.
People that work from their computer, whether they're a graphic designer or they build websites or they work in some sort of social media capacity. And what those people were doing was living in Silicon Valley or living in San Francisco or living in New York, and they were doing these jobs. And maybe they would go to the office or maybe they wouldn't. And what I distinctly remember around 2012 was an uptick in young foreigners arriving, not because they wanted to live in Thailand, because they wanted, it was easier for them to live in Thailand. It was cheaper. Okay. So if you're living in San Francisco and you work as a graphic designer, well, you're getting paid a lot to do that job because you're in the American economy, but your rent is high, your costs of living are very high, you have to have a car, you have to have car insurance, all these things. And then what happened was almost like a couple people came over and said, wait a second, I can live here on $1,000 to $2,000 a month and have a great apartment. I can eat this delicious food that costs $1, okay? Like beer, and to go out, the drinks are not expensive, okay? Healthcare is relatively good. Everything was a fraction of the cost. Why don't I just, I have these world-class beaches and vacation destinations at my fingertips, and why don't I just do my job here? And so what I saw, I distinctly remember like starting to meet, like I said before, if you were living in Thailand, you had to want to be there, because it's not easy to live in a developing country in a place that you don't know, you don't speak the language. And so you have to make the effort. It's just like someone from Southeast Asia moving to America. You're going to have to learn the language. You're going to have to learn how we do things here. How do you do this? How you go to the grocery store? How do you drive a car in America? You have to learn all those things. Well, typically people were coming to America because it was a land of opportunity to improve their quality of life. And this was almost like a flip. They were going to a developing country like Vietnam or Cambodia or Laos or Thailand because it was easier to live there, and they could do their job from remotely. And so I distinctly remember around 2012 starting to meet more young foreigners. Like, what are you doing here? Like, oh, I'm a graphic designer. I work for a firm in San Francisco. I'm like, and they're there because it's easier, it's more fun, and just generally speaking, a better quality of life for them to be there. So now what you have is just from Vietnam to Cambodia, Laos, Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, a huge expat population of young people that are working remotely.
And do you...
and I don't like them.
Okay, I was just going to ask you, were these your friends, or these?
Well, no, they weren't. And it's
were you kind of friends? Because you said you were friends more with the expats. You had a little group of expatriate friends.
I did.
Is that
they were
more of the
related.
old school?
They were the
idea
old school guys. Yeah, they were the old school guys.
And can you tell us a little bit about them?
Yeah, sure. So, well, let me address. It's not that I don't like these young people, but what my issue was that I'm like, you didn't have to go through the struggle of assimilating yourself to the culture in order to survive.
Yes.
I'm better off for that because I'm now more tied to this place, and I'm more invested. I wanted to be as Filipino as I could be. Right. I wanted to be as Thai as I could be. I wanted to be as Japanese as I could be. And I think it comes from a place of respect.
Yeah.
I respect your culture. You know, when people move to America, we expect them to become like Americans. You know, that's what we want. We want you to be like an American. And so the same's true on the other way around.
From Thailand, you even went a step deeper. Now you've gone into Japan. And Japan, this is a famously difficult culture to kind of assimilate into as a foreigner.
Almost impossible.
Right.
You're never going to be accepted. You're never going to be looked at as like an equal.
Right.
I mean, and I don't mean you're going to be looked down upon. Certainly there are ways that they can, but they don't. So living and visiting so many other places in Asia for so many years was really primer for like the big leagues going to Japan, where it's like everything has a meaning. Like, it's not America, it's not big, it's not showy, it's all very subtle and right below the surface, and you have to be careful exactly what word you use and how much you bow and how fat, you know, like everything has like meaning. And that's part of, you know, what we love about Japan, is that I didn't understand I relearned what respect and honor, those stereotypical things that we know about Japan and their history, they're all true. Right. And there's a level of respect, accountability, and honor that's deeply ingrained into their culture, and it percolates all the way down to the basic level of how they interact with strangers on a train, on the subway or in a restaurant, or, ordering a cup of coffee at Starbucks is done differently than it would be done here. The subtle art of being Japanese is a very real thing, and it's taught to children from birth. When I've talked about this to friends, trying to explain it to them, I said, it's like our inherent freedom. It's comparable to an American's inherent freedom. Like, we are the freest country in the world. Like, you and I, our freedom is something that we were is instilled in us from birth. In Japan, the art of being Japanese is something that's instilled in them from birth. And that it has many facets of honor, respect, how you behave, but they know that their ability to be the best version of Japanese people is the most important thing, because their culture is so strong, because their culture is so self-contained, that they're all doing their part individually and as a whole to preserve that. And it has a lot to do with honor. It's a very important word in Japan. It's
something we kind of toss out now too.
We do. We have lost a sense of our honor.
And there's this sort of, like, maybe you can explain this a little bit. There seems to be a slight difference in the definition maybe of honor. What would you consider the Japanese definition?
Exactly.
From your understanding of what honor is.
Just to take one that people might know, is like, Japanese people call each other by their last name. You wouldn't call me Bob. You would say Lyren-san, right? Mm-hmm. Why is that? Why do they call each other by their last name, not their first name? Well, it's because your name it represents you and your clan, and that's how we identify this group of people, right? So I'm from the Lyren clan. If I'm just Bob, there's a lot of Bobs out there, but there's only a few of my clan. And so I know that I have to preserve and protect my name, because it's how people identify me and judge me and view me. And so that's just like one little element to it, of like,
and you're maybe part of something larger than yourself.
Exactly. Japan's famous as a we before me culture. Mm-hmm. And I think that also comes from wanting to protect something that they care very much about. Whereas in America, it's like more individualistic. It's more about going on your own, and you can do everything on your own and getting people out of your way to achieve your goal. I mean, I think our culture is just a little bit more about me before we.
I think you're absolutely right. And I think that, it's interesting. Probably the United States is as far as you can get west in Western culture in a way. And Japan, I feel like, was the farthest east.
I agree. Like I was saying, the stages of my time was like Philippines to Thailand to Japan. Those were like the three big stops. And it was funny because the Philippines is the most assimilated to Western culture. So everyone speaks English. It was a great first country to go to because like everyone speaks the same language I do. Like I said, I'm really glad I went to Japan or lived in Japan last, because it was the farthest away from America and I had plenty of practice living abroad. Right. Whereas if I had gone to Japan first, it might not have gone as well. And back to something you said before, like I never feel like I'm being looked down upon because I'm a foreigner. However, they're acutely aware of their culture and my culture. And that's part of my responsibility of living abroad, is to try to respect that. So I was trying to be as Japanese as I could out of respect for their culture, because I want them at least to see it.
So what was your life in Japan most recently? What was your life like?
I moved to Japan in 2016, and it was the most structured life that I had living abroad, versus other places that I had lived. Again, just because it's a more developed country, there's more infrastructure. So I would say that even though I was living in the most foreign place, my day-to-day existence most closely resembled what my life would be like in the U.S. for your average person. Whereas other places I'd lived prior to that, it was completely different. There was, when I was in Japan towards the end, I left when COVID happened, which I'm sure we can get into. But I remember that I was actually starting to feel a struggle or an internal struggle about my existence in Japan because it had become so structured.
Right.
Because I remember there were times towards the end of Japan, I was thinking, well, essentially I'm just living the same way I would be living if I had been in the US.
Right.
Whereas when I'd been in Thailand or some of these other countries, it was way more like an adventure of a life. And I remember starting to feel a little bit like, oh, maybe it's time for me to make a move back to a place where I could recapture that adventurous sort of spirit, because the more developed the country you live in, the easier it is to live there. The train works better. The food is, it's easier to get. The internet's better. All those things that we take for granted. I was starting to take those things for granted too. And there was a little voice inside my head that's like, you've kind of strayed away from what you were doing before. Is this what you want?
And is that little voice in your head? I mean, is that who you are? Are you someone, Bob, that like can't? I think since I've known you, like, yeah, you don't necessarily. You haven't wanted that traditional life.
I certainly think you can make decisions. Sometimes people make those decisions without knowing why they do it. I just got married because everyone was getting married, and I had kids. I know that I specifically didn't make decisions that I knew would impact my life. For the easiest ones are like getting married and starting a family is a great way to ground you in a certain reality, sense of responsibility. And I was aware of the fact that I had not done those things. And because I hadn't done those things, I had been afforded a completely different path of life that I was enjoying. And so I was acutely aware of that.
And did you have a feeling that maybe that was starting to slip away? Or?
It was. And I mean, I think just the structure of my life in Japan at the time was it was starting to become more grounded. I mean, at some point I could have been like, I could be married right now. I could have a family right now. And it wasn't that I didn't have a negative reaction to that idea. I'd love to have a family one day. But it was just there. I knew that there was something missing. And so ironically, after COVID hit and then I moved back to America, and the things I told you about that I've been up to might have been in a direct response to that experience in Japan.
How did the realization come about that, like, I have to leave Japan?
Sure. So it's directly tied to COVID. We were ahead of the curve in Asia on COVID just because of our proximity to China. So I remember in February, I actually traveled to Canada to see some family and have a little winter vacation. And in first week of February, I went to the airport in Japan and it was like a ghost town. There was no one there. There was hardly anyone on my flight. And then I went to Canada to see some of my family, and they were way behind in terms of like the COVID curve than I was. And then after I returned to Japan and went back to work, the big moment was when COVID broke in the US, things got more serious all over the world. I mean, we'd already had a problem with COVID in Spain and other parts of Europe, but when it broke in the US, it became bigger. And I remember specifically when the US government, the State Department, issued a statement which said, if you're an expatriate living abroad, there is a possibility that it might be difficult for you to return to the US because flights get canceled, airports get shut down, etc. So we're putting you on notice essentially, like anytime after the next 2 weeks, it could be more difficult. So if you want to return to the US, now might be a good time because you could get stuck wherever you are. When that happened, I was like, okay. Yeah. And so I went to my employer and I spoke to him with the Japanese company that I was working for, and I was very fortunate that they were very supportive of me and working with them. So they said, why don't you return to the US and just continue to work remotely, which I did. And that all happened within about 7 days.
7 days.
7 days. So I remember the day that I read the article from the State Department. It was an official statement from the State Department. That day I went in and spoke to my boss, and I was on a plane 7 days later returning to the US.
Wow.
With a small luggage. I left a bunch of my stuff in Japan. I had all these belongings that you just acquire from living in a place for 4 or 5 years. I left all that stuff there, packed a bag, took my computer, and I flew back to the US. And the experience of flying back to the US, so this would have been like March. the experience of flying back to the U.S. was very interesting. Again, it was kind of like that I Am Legend, Contagion film kind of vibe, where I remember I landed in the airport in Minneapolis and it was just deserted. There was no one around. We went through security. We did, they took our temperature, and then I was just like sitting in an empty airport. Everything was closed. And so, and then I just made my way back to Ohio, where I'm from. Now, I will admit that there was a certain level, like even that 7-day turnaround to return to America rekindled a bit of that adventurous kind of, and of course the context was terrible because we were in the beginning of this global pandemic. But I was like, oh, okay, I'm back into like, this is what people that aren't grounded in responsibility like me with a family or a job that you don't have flexibility, they don't get to do this. So I'm just like picking everything up and heading back to America. Under very fortunate circumstances, like I said, I was able to keep my job and they were supporting me. But I remember when I got back to America, it was almost like a little bit of reverse culture shock, coming back to a place that I hadn't lived for 13 years. I remember specifically, like I said, in Asia, we were way ahead of the curve in terms of COVID because of our proximity to China, but also Japanese people and other Asian countries, they wear masks all the time anyway. Before COVID, you would wear a mask. It's not uncommon to see many people on the subway or on the street wearing a mask. And I remember right at the beginning of COVID in America, there was a lot of confusion and conflicting reports about whether we should be wearing masks. And I came from Japan, and I remember the first time I went to the grocery store, I was wearing a mask, and people in the grocery store were like, look at this weird guy wearing a mask. Why is he wearing a mask? Now, of course, everything's changed, but it was kind of funny. It was like when you move to Southeast Asia and you assimilate yourself into a culture and you live on a dead-end street surrounded by Thai people, you're going to get a lot of looks, in the best way possible. The little kids, especially, they love to see this white-skinned, fair hair guy that doesn't look like them. Yeah. And so I had that experience, and I had the exact same experience when I came back to America too. It's like, there is no direction home here. This is not my home because I'm being pointed at and stared at in the grocery store.
How was that adjustment suddenly living in Ohio? You think of, Midwestern, Ohio is about as America as you can get. It's the Midwest. It's,
the heart of it all.
Yeah. And now you're at home, you're with your family again. How was that for you?
There was a honeymoon period of being around my family, and I hadn't been around in 13 years. Except sporadically. So for me to see my nieces and nephews on a daily basis was great. And I enjoyed it. And then like most honeymoon periods, it lasted for a little while. And then I started to get into the day in, day out sort of like quarantined life, which a lot of people experience. Mm-hmm. And I was no different. The only thing I think that might've made me have a slightly different experience was my primer from what I was coming from for the last 13 years. So after the honeymoon phase, it's fair to say I was getting a little bit antsy in a different way than just someone who had been going to an office and then now was forced to work from home.
How did the idea to start to go on a road trip, how did this develop?
Sure. So initially it started, I come from a big family. I have 3 brothers and 2 sisters, and they all have their own families. So my clan is pretty big. And 2 of my brothers had been considering buying motorcycles, and they wanted to buy these bikes. They're called dual sport motorcycles. Essentially what it is like a street legal dirt bike. It looks like a dirt bike that you and I would call a dirt bike, but you're allowed to drive it on the road. And it's for riding on trails, riding in the woods, doing things like a dirt bike. And so 2 of my brothers had been considering getting those because we travel up to Canada in the summers and there's a lot of places to ride there, and they thought it would be a fun thing to have. When I moved back, I was just folded right into that conversation because of my proximity to them. And also the other thing that was going on was that I knew I needed something because I was stuck in lockdown. I couldn't do the things that I would normally do. Like I love jiu-jitsu. I practice jiu-jitsu and I've been doing it for a number of years. I would say on the list of things that you shouldn't do during COVID, like rolling around on the ground with a stranger is probably one of them. Short of like just walking up and kissing strangers, like doing jiu-jitsu with them is like a big no-no.
Yeah.
So that was a problem for me because like that for the better part of, I hadn't been doing jiu-jitsu for 12 years, but for the better part of 12 years, I've been doing Muay Thai, I've been doing boxing, I've been doing jiu-jitsu. I couldn't do any of those things. And that was a big part of my life. And I knew, I'm like, this is dangerous because this is a big void that I need to fill. And when my brothers were talking about buying these motorcycles, I thought, okay, that's an outdoor activity. It's safe. It's something that I can do. So I also decided to buy one of these dual sport motorcycles. And we bought them in May. And we spent the summer riding them, going on trips, day trips, weekend trips, week-long trips, just in the U.S. Like, we would go take our bikes down to West Virginia and spend the weekend riding on trails and camping or staying at a cabin or whatever, or taking day trips to overnight trip to Southern Ohio and riding. And so we got into the early fall. And the thing about a motorcycle is that it's not a 4-season activity. You can't really do it in the winter. And the motorcycle, the dual sport bike, was filling a void. And I was like acutely aware of that. I'm not going to be able to do this anymore. And I'm going to be right back to where I started, except it's going to be colder. And I'm going to really have a hard time figuring out something to keep myself sane.
Your sanity kind of rests on this bike in a way. Maybe,
absolutely. It's my life raft.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so my brothers and I went on a week-long motorcycle trip in the early fall. And we went from Ohio to West Virginia, down to Virginia, back up to Maryland. And this is like 70% trail riding. We're not riding on paved roads. We're riding in the woods, and we're following a predetermined map. But it's not like a road. It's not a road trip. It's a trail trip. And we did a week-long trip, and it was great. We had a great time. And on that trip, I remember sitting in a hotel room with one of my brothers. We had drank way too much wine, and I just said to him, what if I went on a trip by myself? And thankfully, he was very supportive. And both of my brothers were very supportive of this idea of me going out on a trip by myself. And so we came back from the trip, and then honestly, just like when I left in COVID, I would say maybe 10 days later, I had decided that I was going to embark on a solo adventure through America on my motorcycle. So it wasn't something that I had been planning for 4 months or a year and doing research or trying to get a plan together. It was pretty quick.
How did you decide where you were going to go first?
I wanted to hedge my bet a bit because I wasn't sure, and I didn't really share this with anyone, but I was like, I'm the type of person, I want to be careful about how much I extend myself in terms of what I'm going to do, because I don't like the idea of like, I'm going to do this and then I don't do it.
Right.
And so, and also, a very supportive family, mom and dad, brothers and sisters, all very supportive of me, but also like, want to be careful about they already had the primer. I've been living abroad for 13 years. But that being said, now I'm back. So there could have been a sense of like them holding on,
Yeah.
And so for me to be like, hey, I'm taking off on my motorcycle, see you later. They might be like, whoa, wait. So I kind of hedged my bet and I said, what if I just do a trip down to New Orleans? That was the plan. What if I just go to New Orleans, then I'll come back? And actually the way that I framed it to people around me was, I'm going to try to go to New Orleans. Because actually one of the things I was worried about was that I had done trips, but I'd always done trips with other people. I was concerned, like, what if I get out on the road and after like 4 days, I'm like, this sucks. I don't like this. I'm not enjoying this. Then I'm gonna have to turn around and come home. So I didn't want to do like the big, okay, goodbye everyone. Good luck. Take care. Send us a postcard. And then 4 days later, I'm back.
Right.
I didn't want that to happen. The initial plan was, I'm gonna drive to New Orleans or at least I'm going to try. And then after I'm done, I'll probably come back. Now obviously that's not what happened. And pretty quickly into my trip, I realized like 2 or 3 days in, I love this. I'm so happy right now. Oh my God, this isn't going to end. And so, that was the initial plan was to go to New Orleans, but pretty quickly into the trip, I realized it wasn't going to end there. So there's different kinds of, obviously there's different kinds of motorcycles. You've got like Harleys and road bikes, but then what I'm riding is called a dual sport, and it's more like almost like a dirt bike. There's another bike that's called an adventure bike, and you see those a lot on the highway. There's like BMW 1,000 horsepower bikes or 1,000 cc bikes. They're bigger. They're almost like little mini cars, I'm not riding one of those. So when I started the trip, I knew already that I didn't want to take the highway. It was almost like I wanted to do the blue lines. I wanted to take back roads and travel and see different places on my way to New Orleans. The goal was not just to get there as fast as possible. I wanted to have the experience of going there. So that definitely influenced my route and the way that I was driving there.
So where was the next destination after that?
After I finished in New Orleans, I made my way over to Florida and decided to go down to Key West and go to the southernmost point of the United States. And then from there, every point after that was just picking a new destination, future destination to go to, and I'd stop places along the way. And I haven't stopped. I enjoyed day 1 as much as I had enjoyed day 47.
Right.
Day 62, day 23. They're all separate days that have their own little they're all chapters, and they all have a unique, it's all part of a bigger experience.
How did you outfit yourself, and how much thinking went into that in the beginning of the trip?
So it's all a learning curve, and that's part of the fun for me. Like I said, this wasn't something, I did a little bit of research, but I knew that I was going to make mistakes and do things the wrong way, and I wanted that to happen. And one of the mistakes I made right off the bat was I packed way too much stuff. I actually packed like I was going on a week-long trip, whereas I had everything that I would need. And that just adds space and weight to the experience, which you don't want. The goal is to get things as streamlined and small as possible. So actually, since I started 10 weeks ago, I've been shedding, what can I take out of my bag? Do I need that sweatshirt? Do I need this? Do I need that? Can I get rid of this? Can I get rid of that? And I've tried to strip down as much as I can. To answer your question, I think I have about 4 days worth of clothes. So I have to do laundry every 4 days. I travel with camping gear. So I have a tent, a sleeping pad, and a sleeping bag. I have the minimum amount of tools that I would need to fix the bike, and then the smallest amount of personal effects I can bring. A computer, charging cables, clothes, and that's pretty much it.
And a phone.
So
how do you do your laundry?
Typically, I switch between, sometimes I camp, sometimes I stay in Airbnbs, occasionally I stay in a hotel, but that's not very economical. And you just find spots to do laundry. Sometimes you wake up in the morning and you have a destination in mind, but a big part of your day is finding a spot that you can do some laundry.
Well, how often, forgive me for asking this, but how often do you bathe? And where do you bathe? And were you present? Like, did you think about this before you hit the road? Like,
I definitely didn't think about it before I left. I try to bathe every day. No, oftentimes like you're conscious of it in that you're picking spots. Like, oh, there's a campsite that has a shower. I'm going to stay there. And so you need to take showers. You need to brush your teeth and shave. And, that's important. And actually maintaining a good level of hygiene is important when you're on the road for 2 or 3 months, because you don't want to have, you didn't get a blemish, skin blemish that turns into an infection. Now I have a problem. I have to fix this problem. And so it's important to do little things like that, like make sure you're washing behind your ears and taking care and eating well, because if you don't want to, get sick because you're not eating a healthy diet. I don't do a lot of cooking. A lot of guys cook, when they're camping. What I tend to do is, again, I can't eat at a restaurant because it's not healthy. So what I typically do is stop at a grocery store and try to get some semi-healthy food from a grocery store, and, eat a banana in the morning and try to keep a good diet.
Have you lost weight or gained weight?
Well, so one of the problems that I've faced on this trip, one of the challenging things is a lack of exercise, because I'm on the road every day. So it's hard because I can't go to the gym. And so actually my New Year's resolution to myself was I need to start dedicating part of my morning or evening to getting some physical activity done, whether it's in my camp, going for a difficult hike, doing squats, doing push-ups, to try to keep my physicality back up.
How many hours typically are you on the road every day? Sure. Like, do you kind of try to keep that the same amount of hours on the road are you kind of setting a time limit?
one of the things that's different about my experience than other people that might have done something similar because of my situation, I'm not taking a vacation for a week and going on a ride, which a lot of guys that ride motorcycles do. I'm more open-ended. So I don't have to get to a certain destination by a certain time, which would force you to drive a certain way or drive a certain distance. I have a little bit more freedom. When I first started the trip, I was very results oriented, particularly like that first week or two. I was like, okay, I just got to like get to this spot, then get to this spot, then get to this spot. And then after I decided or figured out that like I was going to continue this adventure for as long as I could, it started to become much more about the process. Like I'm going to detour and just go this way, and then I might double back and go a different direction. I wasn't on a destination orientation. In terms of how long I drive each day, I don't take the highways. I typically go back roads. And so I might only average about 45 miles per hour. So a good day for me would be about 300 miles, which is going to take me like 6 or 7 hours.
How physically demanding is that to be riding on a motorcycle for 6 straight hours?
One of the first things I did to my motorcycle to modify it was put on a new seat. So a motorcycle is like anything else. It's like there's a lot of things that you can change and add and take away to modify it, make it better. After I bought the bike, I changed the seat, and I spent not a lot of money, but I spent money to put on a much more comfortable seat, because your butt is the one thing that's going to get, it's going to get tired after 7 hours of riding. In terms of the physicality, your body can get trained pretty quickly, just like anything. You get, after a couple of days, you're sore, but your body gets trained to riding on the bike. In terms of challenges that I face riding the bike, they're all external. Because I'm on a motorcycle, it's hard. You have to sort of do it to appreciate it, but there's no refuge from external conditions like rain or wind or cold weather. I mean, if you wake up at 8 o'clock in the morning and it's 35 degrees outside, you have to go get on the bike. You're not getting into a warm car. Or if it's raining, I mean, I guess I could say, well, I'm just going to sit in my tent all day and wait for the rain to stop, but I don't want to do that. I want to go. So a lot of the challenges are external, like weather.
So what do you do if you wake up in the morning and it's raining?
I've been very lucky with rain. I've only had a couple of days of bad rain. And the hard part is when you're literally on the road and it starts raining. Yeah. And really it's just, it's a case by case basis. If it starts raining too hard, I got to pull over and find cover, basically find a tree or somewhere an old barn on a farm. I'll pull into a barn and just kind of wait it out. I've been very lucky with rain. I have had several days in a row of cold weather, because the wind chill, I'm not protected from the wind. So even if it's 50 degrees, but you're riding on a motorcycle at 50 miles an hour, it's going to feel like 40 degrees, and it's cold. And so it's also part of like stealing your mind. And a big part of going on a cross-country road trip for several months is you have to have a strong mind, or at least get your mind in the right frame of reference to deal with external factors.
Is there something you do every day to do that? Do you meditate? Do you...
I don't meditate like do TM or practice meditation regularly. One of the most unexpected pleasures that I've had from doing this trip is I have the ability to listen to music or listen to a podcast, because I have these speakers inside my helmet and it's connected to my cell phone. So I could just drive down the road and listen to your podcast episode while I'm riding. And it makes for a real pleasurable riding. And at the beginning of the trip, I did that. Listen to this podcast or listen to some music. And then pretty quickly I stopped doing that, because it was almost like too distracting. Like if I was just going on a regular day trip and I was going to come home for dinner, maybe I'd put some music on. But I knew that in order to experience this the way I wanted to, I had to have like an open, clear mind. I didn't want to be distracted. And I had one of the most singular, interesting experiences from driving for hours at a time with no mental distractions beyond, being careful on the bike. And what I learned is that if given hours, 5 or 6 hours, no cell phone, no phone calls, no nothing, your mind can go in these amazing directions and these amazing places. And you can just let your mind think about things for hours at a time. And some of the most pleasant and pleasurable days I've had are when my brain is just going and I'm just internally thinking about all these different things and having these amazing mental, it's almost like a form of meditation.
I was going to say, it sounds like riding the bike itself is almost a meditative experience.
And I understand that most people don't have this experience, but I would equate it to being able to go into a room and almost like meditate for as long as you want without any distractions. You're always amazed at where your mind can go during those episodes. And I get to experience that on a daily basis, which is not something I was anticipating.
Right. Do you think you're training in like jujitsu, for example? Like, I know martial arts often have, there's a certain, it seems to be about focus. Like, has that played a role in any of this, do you think? Or?
I definitely think that in particular, jiu-jitsu requires a long period of dedication. It's not something that you can do very quickly. You have to dedicate a lot of your time to it. So there's a discipline that comes with that. And I think that discipline has certainly aided me, because this trip turned into maybe it's going to be a week to now almost 3 months later. So there was just a level of discipline. Of course, you could also get that from work or from other hobbies. But for me, the discipline that I've developed from doing some other things has played out here.
You're by yourself for hours almost all the time.
Almost all the time.
It's interesting to me that a lot of people have spent like the COVID lockdown by themselves inside. You are spending it alone, but outside. How do you deal with the loneliness? Is it something that it doesn't bother you at all? Or is it something that it does bother you, but how are you dealing with that?
There are moments of loneliness, and, particularly if I've had a difficult day, like the weather was cold, or I made a mistake on the bike, or something happened that I wasn't expecting that wasn't good, it can contribute to that feeling of like, I'm alone, I miss people, what am I doing out here? But those instances are few and far between, and far outweighed by just a general excitement and happiness about what I'm doing. So every day I wake up excited to get on the bike, to see what I'm going to see what's going to happen as the process continues. So loneliness is never really a problem for me. It's there, but it's dwarfed by a general excitement about what's going on.
Right. You're encountering something new like every moment.
Pretty much, yeah. Like,
I mean, you could say everybody is, but you're really sort of literally
actively driving to something new every moment.
What has been the most challenging part of this trip for you so far?
It goes back to the video blog.
Yeah.
I didn't start the video blog right away. In fact, the first maybe 10 or 12 days of my trip, I was just experiencing the adventure of going on this trip, and I wasn't filming it. And as someone that has a background in media, we both do, you know that creating something requires a dedication to that creation. In other words, if you're gonna make a video, you have to make the video. My problem was that that's kind of in conflict with what I was doing, which is riding my bike around the country, meeting people, seeing things, and having experiences. And so the most challenging part was figuring out a balance between how do I record this, film it, document it in a way that I feel comfortable sharing with it, while also having what I thought was this very individual experience of going on this road trip. And so it took me a couple of days and to figure out how to do it. And I had to make some concessions on both ends. Like, I can't film that the way I should because it's going to be too difficult, or I can't go exactly where I want to on my bike because I have to be conscious of the fact that I'm going to have to film it, things like that. That's probably the most challenging part. You
don't want the act of creating a video log about what you're doing, or a video blog about what you're doing, to disrupt just the pure experience of what you're doing,
and vice versa.
You're trying to capture that pure experience, but not maybe
and the other way, I also don't want the act of just driving and being on the road trip to negatively impact a thing that I would like to share with people. Right. So it's all about finding that balance, and that's been a challenge, and it continues to be a challenge, and it's something that I deal with.
You shared a little clip of a video of one of your vlogs with me in preparation for this interview today.
One of the episodes, yeah.
One of the episodes, and you were in a small town, very small town in Texas.
Del City, Texas.
Yeah,
population like 487 or something.
And you were in the Spanish Angel Cafe.
Correct.
And I was just curious, like, when you walk into the cafe, do you say to them, like, hey, do you guys mind if I film you? Or how does that kind of interactions start. But I appreciated that episode because you walk in and we're like, it's really interesting to go just meet people on the road. But how do you set that up?
Sure. So I'm glad that I got to share that clip with you. And I think that clip that I shared is indicative of what I've been experiencing on a daily basis, which is people are very friendly and welcoming to someone that they don't know coming into their little world. So in this example, I stopped in this little cafe. It was a gas stop. It was an unscheduled stop and I needed gas because I was in West Texas, and sometimes gas stations in West Texas can be pretty few and far between. So I knew that I was going to go to this place called Del City just for gas. And while I was there, I saw this cafe and I went inside, and there's like the two people, a husband and wife that run the place. And there was one couple eating in there. And I ended up spending like an hour there because I just had the most amazing conversations with them. And I think that the fact that I'm on the road on my motorcycle is a great icebreaker because it's like surprising. It's like, people don't see that every day. So it's an automatic sort of like open window to a conversation. But for me, I actually feel like I'm the one that gets the better end of the deal because I get to meet people that I normally wouldn't get to meet, like the guy, I forget his name, but really friendly guy, started asking me questions, ended up talking to him, and he's buying me beer before he leaves. And it's just a really nice gesture. I mean, he's just a stranger. Now, nothing unique happened except we just talked.
Yeah.
And then, if I had walked into that place and said, hey, will you buy me a beer? He'd probably tell me to get lost. But the fact that I just spent a few minutes talking to him about my experience, all of a sudden he's ready to buy me a beer. That happens to me again and again. People typically are okay with being filmed because I'm doing something. I'm not just someone that's just walking around filming people. I'm a guy on a motorcycle on a trip around the country, and I tend to film my experiences.
You've been living abroad for 13 years. You've been having this incredibly epic adventure. How do you think the country has changed or is changing since you last lived here?
One of the things that I think is pretty interesting is I think that America has become much more of a me first. There's like a me first prism through everything. And I think that might be related to social media. And of course, there's tons of material, the people talking about this, but it is kind of evident, I think, in politics and culture and the way that people approach things is there is just sort of a me first attitude is more amplified than when I lived here 13 years ago. That being said, I don't think that I'm surprised, but I'm I always enjoy these amazing experiences I have with people I meet along the way. Americans are still very kind, friendly, love to talk, walk up to a stranger on a motorcycle at a gas station and strike up a conversation. I mean, essentially it happens every time I get gas, I meet someone, and there are people that want to come up and talk to me. And so I am reminded about how outgoing, friendly, and approachable Americans are.
How does your experience of the country now, and again, you're literally driving across it, and you're going through small towns, small rural communities. You're probably going through more of those than you are large cities, just
Definitely.
out of a necessity. How does that square with what you're seeing, kind of those places being portrayed in the media, let's say?
This whole process has actually been about rediscovering America, as you pointed out. I'm kind of interesting that, and from a COVID point of view, everyone had to sort of go inside, and I was able to find a way to kind of go outside. But I am through this process, and I didn't start out trying to do this, but I am kind of rediscovering America after a long absence. And when I returned, I started to get more integrated and involved in like the news and politics just because of my proximity to it. And I would say that what we're seeing on the news is a piece of reality that's put through their filter. In other words, sometimes when I watch the news, I feel anxiety, I feel depressed, I feel worried, but my day in, day out experiences on the road don't reflect that. I don't see that. I don't see political aggression. I don't see people behaving inappropriately towards people that they disagree with. I don't see any of it. So it is kind of interesting when you take things from what you might see on the news or the media, I'm not really seeing that reflected in my day-to-day experiences.
You talked about how living in a foreign country in Asia, you have attempted to the best of your ability to kind of assimilate back in or into the different culture that you're living in. Now you're back in the United States again. Do you feel like you have to kind of like assimilate back into the United States now?
Again, when I started this journey, the goal wasn't to try to rediscover my country. I didn't have a plan. It just happened, but it is happening now. And I do think that it reminds me, if I'm going to pull from our mutual history. Yeah. Do you remember in 2003, you and I went to see a documentary film called The Fog of War?
Yes.
By Errol Morris. And it's about Defense Secretary Robert McNamara, his interviews with Robert McNamara. Now, for the listeners, Mike and I, that was a sort of a seminal moment in our friendship, going to see that documentary film together. Well, there's a part of that documentary where Robert McNamara is talking to the director, Errol Morris, and he says, Robert McNamara quotes a poem by T.S. Eliot. And the quote is, "We shall not cease exploring. And at the end of our exploring, we will arrive where we started and know the place for the first time." And that was 17 years ago. And that quote was always with me. I mean, I didn't reference it on a regular basis, but when we talked about doing this podcast, one of the first things that occurred to me was that quote by T.S. Eliot. And I think that to a certain degree, that's what I'm doing, is that I have never stopped exploring. And then now that I've returned back to the place where I started, I'm discovering it again for the very first time.
And do you think, or how has living abroad for 13 years, how has that changed the way that you look at the United States?
I think that's why I'm on the road right now. I'm trying to figure that out. And I've been on the road for nearly 3 months, and I plan to continue, but that's the answer that I'm seeking. I should say that's what I'm seeking, and I'm not sure there's an answer there. Yeah. I don't know how I look at it differently. I just know that I feel like I'm looking at it for the first time.
What is the impression you're getting when you're looking at it right now?
The impression that the realization that I've come to is that I believe that it's more a reflection of the person doing the exploring, the person that's looking, rather than what it is that you're finding. It's like I'm much more interested in the wide variety of questions than I am the answer. So can I break for a second and tell you a little sideline story?
Yeah.
Kind of like a ship, it's bad luck if you don't give your bike a name. Yeah. So I named my bike, and I named it Hopper, okay? After Dennis Hopper, Easy Rider, okay? Right. Obviously, like Easy Rider, seminal movie about guys going on a road trip across America. The tagline for Easy Rider is, "They went in search of America and couldn't find it anywhere," okay? The tagline for my series is, "I went in search of America and found it everywhere." Okay. Right. Everywhere I go, I feel like I am seeing what America is, for better and for worse. And what I realized is that this journey is more about how I see America, because whatever you want to find out there, you're going to find it. If you're looking for political division, if you're looking for turmoil, if you're looking for a country on the brink, you can find it. If you're looking for sort of the tenets of what it means to be an American, freedom, pursuit of happiness, pursuit of opportunity, you're going to find that too. You can find excess, you can find conservatism, you can find everything in between. And I've seen it all. And I think it's not about what I'm hoping to find. It's about, I want to continue the journey looking.
What do you think Americans, particularly right now, might benefit from learning from Japan?
I wish everyone could have the opportunity to experience a completely different culture. And moreover, to do it in a mentally relaxed environment. Because I think what I learned, or what I wish people could learn, is that America's like the center of a lot of things, but there's a whole bigger world out there. And they're doing things in a different way. It's not better, it's not worse. I always have been, and I continue to be so impressed with taking a sense of personal responsibility, call it honor, call it self-respect, that if you challenge yourself to be true to live with a moral or ethical code that you design, that can make not only you a better person, but it can contribute to making society, your little community, your country, and the world a better place. I do believe that. And I see the evidence of that from Japan. That internal sense, inbred sense of honor and respect is a very real thing, and it can have a profound effect on the way that their community or society operates.
You've done things, you've kind of done at least two things that I can think of that other people, like, it's the kind of thing people just like dream about. They're like, oh, you know what I'd love to do? I'd love to just go live in a foreign country, you know? I'd really love to do that. That's my dream, you know, and it's very romantic. And another one would be like, oh, I want to drive a motorcycle across the country. I'm just going to leave everything behind and go drive across the country. And these are things that people romanticize about. But what would you say to those people before they do that? If they're going to do that for themselves, what would be the advice that you would give them?
I think there's two things that I would like to say about it. Number one is, don't think that you can't do it. Because the truth is, I did both of those things without a plan. Now, I had to manage it. Of course, I still am managing my life abroad, and I'm managing this trip while I'm on it. But don't think for a second that I had something special about me that made me capable of doing this in terms of like starting or, you know, getting the jump off. Mm-hmm. That would be the first thing I'd say, is that. So it also doesn't have to be extreme. Like, you don't have to move to a foreign country, but you can go visit a foreign country, or you can take a unique vacation. Don't do the thing that you normally do. Challenge yourself. The second thing I would say is, I think that leave your mental baggage, leave that at home. Drop your impressions, your preconceived notions about what it is that you're going to see or where you're going to go. Leave that at home and go with an open mind as you can, because you're going to be amazed at what you can experience. And conversely, I tried to do that when I came back to America. After being gone for so long, I didn't want to have all these preconceived notions about what I thought America was, particularly when I went on this unplanned road trip. Like, I'm trying to let it come to me. Whatever it is that I see and experience, I want it just to be what it is, not what I think it should be or what I'm expecting it to be. So for people that want to do something, figure out what it is that you can do and do it, and try to have as an open mind about it as you can.
Is it true that you can never really go back home?
I think that people define that word home in different ways. For a lot of people, it's a literal thing. It's a place that you grew up. It's a place that where your family is, or it's your house where you live and work and share your life experiences with people that are close to you. I think for really lucky people, home can be a person. Home can be someone, a partner, a husband or a wife, or a life partner, and they are your partner in your journey. And that's a great thing. I consider myself especially lucky because, for me, I define home as an experience. It's a process. That to me feels like home. So, in essence, I'm always home. Wherever I am and whatever I'm doing, if it's a part of my process and my experience in life, I feel like I'm home. So that's how I define home. And I think that anyone that wants to can find their own definition of what home means and then go to it.
If you're in that mindset, then I suppose in a way the term no direction home, well, there is no direction home because you always are home.
For me, yeah. When we started this podcast, the first question you asked is why I called my video blog No Direction Home, and I said, I don't really have an answer. I'm hoping to figure it out by the end. And I honestly feel like we're much closer to me figuring that out than we would when we started.
Right. How long do you anticipate being on the road?
when I started the road trip, I was careful not to try to define it, because I was worried about if I fell short or it didn't work out. And also I'm now careful about how long am I going to extend it, because I don't know what's going to happen. What I can tell you is that being on the road and having this experience feels like I'm home. And no one wants to leave home, because home is where you're the best version of yourself. So my hope is that I can continue to not only have this unique experience, but also to share it through a YouTube channel and video blog, and that people will also enjoy the experience and take something away from it. And if they do, then that motivates me to continue to keep going, to try to seek out this direction home.
Well, Bob, I really want to thank you for coming on the show today. If you would just briefly tell people where they might be able to find your blog.
Sure. So it's going to be a YouTube channel called No Direction Home. If they just go onto YouTube and search No Direction Home, and then there'll be the corresponding social media, and they can follow me and communicate with me there. I'd like to say, I hope that I can come back and share more of my experiences after I've been continuing this journey.
Right. Well, let's consider this like part one.
Okay, there we go.
I definitely think that we should check in maybe in 6 months.
Sure.
We'll do another one, and we'll see where you are, and we'll see if you've managed to assimilate back into the United States. And again, thank you very much, Bob, for coming on the show. And everyone, you've been listening to Interview Time.